Okay, so Dongbo has laid out the situation that we have, which is that we have the potential of mobile phones to help with cessation. We have the evidence that shows they can help with cessation. The big question that we sort of got stuck with was, how do you actually then make that happen? How do you practically create a system in a country, not just at a scale for a clinical trial, but for an entire population to use phones for cessation services? So in 2012, WHO partnered with the UN Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, which is a little-known organization called the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union. And their main strength is, for this, obviously, they know mobiles. They've got all the expertise in the same way that WHO has the expertise for health. So we sort of put the two together, and what we've been developing are these global handbooks on all of the ingredients that you need to think about when you're looking at changing a successful clinical study and the evidence base and translating that into an actual live program in a country, because some of the content will be the same at the clinical level, but there will be areas such as the user base, adaptation, the audiences, and the day-to-day running of the program that will need a different approach. So what we try and create are these global handbooks which have got all of those ingredients together in the handbook itself. And these are broadly structured around 5 areas, which are the ones up here. So you have the SMS content, which is very closely based on the evidence-based trials. You have the technology, so that's the platform, is how do you deliver those messages, if there are algorithms determining how many messages, what time of day, for which users. You have the promotion, how do you get people to want this program? Do they even know about it? The monitoring and evaluation, because as has been discussed, you need that evidence base. You need to be able to show that what you're doing works. And finally, slightly more prosaic, the program management, the day-to-day running, which sounds the least exciting part. We found in countries often the most important. So WHO is working with the ITU to develop these handbooks for a number of areas for chronic diseases, and tobacco is one of them. As Dongbo has laid out, the evidence base is fairly strong for tobacco using SMS messages. So at the moment, out of a total of 9 countries that we work with directly, 4 of them are in tobacco cessation. And these are, as Dongbo mentioned, India, Costa Rica, Tunisia, and the Philippines. And there are different stages of implementation. So I'll walk you through the main outlines of each country, and then we're going to go into specifics of India because it's our largest country. And from the number here, you'll see why that is. Since they launched the program in January 2016, and they wanted this to be a national level program, they have ended up with over 2 million people registering interest. For tobacco cessation, that's a big number. We are also looking at how, I think they want to know how this can be further extended. So at the moment, it's available in English and Hindi. They're looking at other languages. They're also looking at, I'll come on to this later, but they're also looking at other ways to expand access to this and the actual impact and evaluation to see how, if there are gaps in the service or inequality, how these could be filled. So India started in 2016. The first country that we were working with was very different, Costa Rica. So Costa Rica is a much smaller user base, but they were the first quite brave country, I think, in the world to commit to this idea of a national tobacco cessation service using mobile phones. So they set up their platform back in 2013. They have a very low, at the moment, a low tobacco consumption rate. But one of the things they've tried to look at is making this platform available to other countries in Central America and Latin America more broadly, because a lot of the content, the adaptation of the messages, and the setup and the systems, and obviously the language, is all common. So it means that you can create the system much more rapidly, and so you can actually implement and start seeing results a little bit faster. So at the moment, we've had interest from Panama, who are looking at how they might be able to introduce an EMS tobacco cessation program next year. Maybe this time in a year, we'll be reporting on how that went. Tunisia and the Philippines. Tunisia is in the final stages of preparation for the program, so they're actually looking at launching this month, which is quite exciting. The original Minister of Health who supported the program, interestingly, was actually a smoker himself. He signed up to be the first person to receive the messages. So now that he's not minister, it's a little bit more difficult to find out if he's actually going to read those messages or not, but we're trying. So they will be launching the program for tobacco, not just for smoking tobacco, but also for shisha, because for them, there's not always very high population awareness of the fact that shisha is tobacco. Shisha has all the same health implications as cigarettes. But because it's considered more of a social thing, it's considered more socially acceptable, and for women as well as men, interestingly. So because of that, we're trying to focus the program on looking at how to support cessation for that as well. And finally, the Philippines are looking at the kind of first step of designing a program. So for them, it's more about testing some of the content and different audiences in 2 or 3 cities by the end of the year. And then based on those results, I think they'll be looking to scale up next year. But it's committed from the Department of Health, and they want to see this program move ahead. So a little bit more detail. India. They, as I mentioned, launched in 2016. And this is all part of India's kind of bigger push to make digital services for health and across other parts of the country more prevalent under this Digital India. So this is a big program across multiple sectors. They tried to max out as much access as they possibly could. So they launched, most countries tend to launch in, one state or a couple of cities and then scale up from there. India said, no, we're going to do everything big scale first time round. So they started across all 29 states of the country. They started in 2 languages. And interestingly, each country will take the global recommendations or the kind of global content that is developed in a handbook, and they will adapt that depending on their own user groups and their own national needs. So India introduced a couple of areas which were different from other countries by developing this idea of promotion through a missed call. So usually you would just send, if I'm a smoker and I want to quit, I will send a message saying something like quiero dejar, meaning in Costa Rica, like, I want to quit, simple, to a short code, which is a little number. It's usually free for the user, so you're able to send the message, and then by doing that, you opt into the program and you can start receiving the messages. India decided that because messages can sometimes there's sometimes literacy or there are other barriers to sending that message, that they would also offer a missed call service. And that's, I think, been one of the main reasons why they've seen such high uptake. The other unique thing that they offered was for the content, they looked at smokeless tobacco. So they looked at chewing tobacco as well. And all of this content information is then shared back with WHO in the initiative so that it can be used by any other country who wants to look at that content and adapt it for their own use. So we're sort of looking at a snowball effect where you gain this experience that's currently, you have the small-scale clinical evidence, but not the large scale. So when you're bridging that gap, these are the country programs that will give you the information on, from a clinical trial point of view, what worked when you scaled it up, and also what didn't work, so that you can avoid that and help countries get successful programs more quickly. So India is currently monitoring the impact of the tobacco cessation. They have, I think you can see here this dashboard. So they have a live dashboard which shows some of the breakdown for key criteria they're looking at. So that could be the gender of users, that could be where in the country most people seem to be using the program. And this helps them actually monitor how the tobacco program is being received and how they can either improve it or what the results are that they should be expecting. And I think the impact analysis and the evaluation is being carried out by the government and should be available next year, which is something we're all really excited about. So what's sort of not more important by any standards, but what's interesting is that it's not just about tobacco. This is a whole new way of looking at support for chronic diseases. So I think what's nice is that tobacco is sort of the pioneer in this. They're taking the first step because the evidence is strongest. But at the same time, it's just the tipping point. So you can, as you can see, these are all of the different areas where, through this initiative, we're working on content for countries. So there are areas which are chronic disease comorbidity. So you might have MTB tobacco. So for people with TB who are also smokers, which is a very niche subsect. There are other programs such as diabetes, mobile hypertension, so help for prevention of cardiovascular disease. There in Zambia, we have a program running for cervical cancer. And then there are also areas, Norway is developing a broader lung disease package, which includes some of the tobacco work, but is also looking at conditions such as asthma. And the point about this is that the joy of technology is it's agnostic. So once you've got the technology in terms of the systems and the protocols in place, you can actually, providing there is evidence on how and what type of content you want to use, you can sort of do a plug-and-play approach where you have the experts review content, you make sure the content is appropriate for the audience, but you can then use a very similar technology system to get that content out to people and to review the impact of that content. So what we end up with is this sort of different levels, a layered approach. So you start off with tobacco cessation, and you can then move on to other areas of disease control. So you might look at adding TB and tobacco. In India's case, they now have a program on mobile diabetes, so prevention, to help people know for diet or for physical activity what to do to avoid prevention for type 2 diabetes. You can have other areas. It doesn't just have to be disease management. It could also be health worker training. It could be prevention. It could be appointment reminders. Wherever there's evidence, and as the evidence base keeps growing, the opportunities for using your platform are also growing. So eventually we have this big vision that you have a national health system which can basically, providing there is evidence on a particular area, implement any control for health that they want to, providing it uses this basic system of mobile health. And it's currently SMS-based, as Dongbo mentioned. Apps are out there at the moment. They're not necessarily, there's no evidence on how effective they are, but that might change. There might be other types of digital technology, which we have in 5 years, that will be able to deliver the same type of content. So this sort of approach allows governments to be flexible about what they're looking at and what the priorities are for disease, and how they actually address that through their systems, but without making them reinvest every time. So, and then this is, everyone's very familiar with the SDG colors and slide now, but this is just a reminder as to how, from a global perspective, this matters, because it's not just tobacco. It's about tobacco being, this mobile approach being a new way of looking at health, not as improving vertical programs one at a time, but of cumulatively getting this comprehensive approach to tobacco control as part of a broader health. So tobacco is involved in agriculture, it's involved in education, it's involved in health far and a bit way beyond just smoking a cigarette. And so by looking at this broader, comprehensive approach to tobacco control through technology, you can actually start to leverage that very ambitious goal in the SDGs of promote health and well-being for all at all ages. And there are these 3 areas of achieving universal health coverage, reducing chronic disease mortality and morbidity by a third by 2030, and the all-important Framework Convention for Tobacco Control. It's a way to sort of fit 3 in 1, but at the same time, it's the sort of first step in a way of looking at health control that isn't going to have ramifications not just for tobacco, but for health and well-being across all the areas. So, I mean, we like to think of it as sort of one small step for tobacco control and one big step for public health. So there we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susannah and Dongbo, for your presentations and for adjusting to the agenda we have. So we have time for questions and comments on these 2 combined presentations. So it's your turn to make questions and suggestions. Even si lo preferís en español, también podéis intervenir. It's your turn.
I will do it in English, and sorry to take the floor again. I have a question to you, Susannah. We heard from Dongbo that it is a cost-effective if we talk about cessation. Yeah. My question is, what is the cost? You showed those 4 countries which are very advanced stage of implementing the cessation. So what are we talking in terms of money what the government has to put up to kick off the work? Because I think very often this is in a tough economic conditions, I think it's a relevant question for everybody, how quickly it pays back.
Agreed. So I don't know if you're going to like this answer. It depends. So from country to country, a lot of countries have got mobile technology. They've got the infrastructure from the private sector for normal SMS, but in terms of how much within the government structure, is there a system for using SMS for any other type of outreach? So in the case of India, the technology that they use is based on a platform called lthy, which is a much broader way of using SMS to reach members of the population for different initiatives, whether that's banking, whether that's health or education. And so there, the India infrastructure was free because the government already had it. So they quite literally, and they've also got the SMS, they have an agreement with mobile operators that a certain number of messages will be provided for free every year. So for them, it was incredibly low cost. They had to provide, I think, staff support and some of the promotion activities. That was pretty much it. In other countries where you're building in a platform or you're building in a capacity, initially, depending on how much they already have and what they want to build in, you can have systems which are just, a software package which you bring in. You can have a hardware where you also buy a server. So it can range from sort of the technology from sort of, $25,000 to $80,000, depending on how sophisticated you want to be. And then from that, you have the cost of the SMS messages, which are usually negotiated as well. That's why we have ministries of ICT involved, because they help with the negotiations. And you will also have the program running costs, so the administration. Other than that, once you've made those investments, it sort of ticks its own way along. So it's something where you can sort of, I think of it as a bit like pick and mix. You kind of decide what you like and what you need, and you look at out of that. It might not be a cash contribution you make. It might be something where you have an agreement that a staff member will work on delivering the content or on designing the program, and then somebody else, like a telecom operator, will come forward and say, we can provide 1 million SMS messages for the first year in kind, and that's fine. So it depends.
Yeah, I just would like to add, I think in order to make the cost effectiveness, once the service has been set up, the main goal is to have broader reach. You can imagine the investment already done. If you only able to reach like 100 smokers, that's completely different from if you can reach like 10,000 smokers. So I think the key, we have to reach a wider, large population of tobacco users.
I have two questions, one for each. So for Susannah, I would like to know what are the mechanics, how it works, these programs, and if you can provide any example of in India or in Costa Rica, who is behind of these messages and how it's working in the day-to-day. And for Dombo, I would like to know if, do you have experience of testing this kind of technology in vulnerable population, like mentally ill population, and if you have comparison data of the effectiveness?
Actually, just say what I know is always from the evidence to studies. Now, as I mentioned, we have a Cochrane review or different other reviews about this, because this is really some kind of very encouraging approach, because able to reach potential to reach a large number of tobacco use. The current study has been done mainly, if you say vulnerable population, mainly among the youth or young smokers. And actually, the participants have more women in terms of the program. Actually, more women actually participated in this kind of program. But I didn't see any study has been done among the patients with like mental health disorders. That's something maybe in the future we can explore. Just in general, the participants of this kind of intervention, many young smokers and female smokers.
Okay, and so for the other, so it's the first point which actually caused a little bit of a problem when Tunisia were testing the content, is it is all based on algorithms. So it's not like remote consultation where you have somebody, like a live clinical person at the other end texting replies. It's more like a set of pre-established messages that somebody from the country or people from the country and global experts have reviewed to say, this is this message is clear. It's not recommending that when you are craving a cigarette, you go and, do something which isn't going to help break the craving. It's evidence-based content, but it's also engaging. It's not like sending, you know, an article of some very technical document to somebody who's having a real moment of wanting a cigarette. They need to have something a bit more useful. So because it's algorithm-based, it's not, Tunisia, the problem we had when we were testing was that they thought it was a human being. So they would text their own very kind of random questions at any hour of the day or night, and the system didn't really know what to do with this. So we had to have a way to channel them back in, sort of, I'd like a little error message saying, please ask me one of the following questions. But in general, what they will do, so you set up as front end and back end. The back end is the technology and how that works, and the front end is what the person receiving the messages will see. So back end is this set of algorithms where, based on certain responses that the person might send, you'll get a message. So if I sign into the program, let's say I send a message saying quiero dejar, the program sees that I come in, and it will send me a couple of questions like how many cigarettes do you currently smoke? So it's trying to work out how addicted you are. What is your age, you know, between 25 and 35, 35 and 45, 45 and 55, level of addiction, or something like gender, like are you male or female? Based on those algorithms, it will then put you into a channel for receiving a certain type of message for that target audience. And you'll receive those messages at the start with higher frequency, because that's the more difficult period. And as the months go by and you hopefully maintain your quit attempt, you get fewer and fewer messages. And from the trials, that's been the best way of managing message volume, because if you send a lot of messages continuously, people switch off. It doesn't say anything, and if you're proud of the fact that you've stopped smoking, to your mind, and you've been doing it for 2 months, you don't really want a reminder every day that you used to be a smoker, because it makes you annoyed at the program. And then when you actually do need the support, you might have signed out of the program and you might not make the quit attempt. So kind of on a day-to-day basis, that's what it looks like. You might get a message once, twice, or maybe 3 times a day, which is saying it might be encouragement, it might be a message telling you something about how much money you're saving by not smoking, which is quite a popular one. It might be something more based on, you know, you're doing this, it's not for you, it's for your family. Imagine how much better your children's health is by you not having a cigarette. And so they've got different, depending on the audience, they've got different messages which will look at what is the best way of basically convincing someone that what they're doing is a good thing for them and for their families.
Can you tell us if you have detected any cultural difference between the countries in terms of, I mean, sending the messages or what the audience want to listen?
Massive. So Costa Rica, for example, based on clinical evidence, I think one part of and the trials, mostly at this earlier stage, were based in high-income countries, so, you know, the US, the UK, New Zealand. And their recommendation was for the first initial period of a sign-up, you should receive messages maybe 2 or 3 times a day to really keep the motivation going, because those audiences liked having that sense of connection with the program. And after they'd been implementing in Costa Rica, I spoke to somebody there informally, and they said, I find this program incredibly invasive. Every 3 or 4 hours, I get this little text, and it's really annoying me, so I switched it off. And you get a sense then of, you know, that something for us is really important because it keeps you engaged. For them, they found almost threatening because it was something which they didn't feel had a part in their day, and they found it annoying. So there's for frequency of messages, and also for whether people prefer, I think in Tunisia, they were much more open, and messages which were more encouraging were much better. So not saying something which is sort of a warning, you know, smoking can cause serious health problems for you and your family, smoking might give you lung cancer. They wanted more positive messages. So, you know, by not smoking, your breath will smell sweeter, or congratulations, you've managed 2 days, you know, you're doing really well. So it depends a little bit it also depends on audience.
So just would like to add a little bit, because I was involved in the Costa Rica and the Tunisia database. I think in general it's not different from what you are doing as face-to-face counseling. It's mainly, say, different way to deliver the intervention. It's also based on the series, say, I divide it into before you set a quit date, prepare you, and after you have quit date, I help you go through this first 2 weeks to make sure you won't have relapse or lapse, and the combine of some practical counseling methods, as like Susannah mentioned, like what you can do if you have cravings, but also like theory-based interventions, like how to improve the motivation, confidence, how to like reduce the cravings. There are other, just mentioning both theory-based but also practical methods. And in each country, the things like you have to link into the existing services. If you have no quit line, there won't be a message say call your quit line. Just a very simple example. Yeah, this is a practical way, I think, just to mention.
That's actually a fantastic point that should have come up earlier. It's not about replacing an existing service. This is absolutely about filling a gap in whatever the existing tobacco cessation services you might have are, or tobacco control. And from the Cochrane review that Dongbo mentioned, the 2016 one of the clear messages or limitations, depending on how you look at it, is that the evidence of the successful interventions was in countries which already had good tobacco control policies. So part of it is making sure that you integrate with what's already there. It's not that you can use this and you can get rid of all your quick clinics or your cessation. It's a fill the gap rather than a complete replacement.
¿Sí? Oh, ahora sí, ya me... soy Ana Ricovene, enfermera de aquí, de esta institución. Trabajo con Esteban Fernández y llevo la deshabituación de tabaco de pacientes y de familiares y del personal casa, etcétera. Utilizamos el teléfono como herramienta, además de las vías, lo convencional, dijéramos, ¿no? Pero no entiendo muy bien cómo contactáis con la gente, si contactáis antes de que quieran dejar de fumar, dándoles mensajes previos, porque esto sí que no lo hacemos, o a partir de que las personas dicen que quieren dejar de fumar, entonces les dais los mensajes estos recordatorios en diferentes medidas según la fase en la que esté, ¿no? De avanzada. Y creo que, claro, la diferencia también es que vosotros implicáis a los gobiernos, ¿no? En el tema este, no es tema privado de cada entidad. Gracias.
I thank you very much for testing my Spanish. I can try and answer, and then maybe if you want to translate for Dongbo as well, just in case Dongbo has anything to add. So I think no, that's okay. So I think what we are trying to do with the programs, you're right. So what we typically do in terms of engaging people is there will be a promotion campaign that says, you know, like this is how a new way of quitting smoking, or like time to quit, use your phone. And people will register. Within that, once they register, it's not that they immediately start to receive the service. They will usually have a message that says, when would you like to quit? Pick a quit date. And you can pick a date up to 2 weeks in the future, so that it's not saying immediately the second I register, I have to be mentally ready to quit. I get a little bit of time, and during that period, the message system tries to engage you further. So it will send things like 9 days to go until you quit, get rid of all of your clothes that smell of tobacco smoke, wash everything, you know, hide the cigarette, like anything to do with smoking or tobacco in your house, get rid of your ashtrays, like all little quits to help it, so that when the moment comes, they're a little bit more psychologically prepared for then actually making that quit attempt. And you're right, this is a government-owned program, so this will be something where technically anybody in the country is able to access it. So it's not through individual institutions, it's through this government approach. And then different institutions might advertise the program in a different way, but it's all part of the government mainstay.
Okay, I try to answer if I understand correctly. You're asking about how we're going to recruit smokers into this program, right? And I think I saw, according to evidence and also the experience I had, there are several ways to do that, or each country has to think about the sustainable way, the low-cost way to do that. For example, the very like common way you have advertisement, people can send a message to the program, and if the advertisement is free, it's great. If it costs a lot, then think about other practical methods. For example, in many countries who have telephone quit line, the callers, you can ask them, are you willing to receive text messaging program as well? If they said yes, you can just put them. So this is a way combined to existing mechanism already in the country. Another very important channel or way is to do the referral from healthcare providers, like you mentioned. When the patients come to your office, not for treating tobacco, they come to you for other reason. You can identify them. If they are smoker, you can refer them to this program. This is a more sustainable way. And in fact, if you look at the telephone quit line, the most reliable, cheap way to get callers is through this referral from the healthcare system. Just say this is relatively new. At this moment, I think mainly we just use the advertisement and use the text message as a message to recruit. But in the future, when this program has been widely implemented, we will get more experience about doing that. And I've just say different countries can have their own experience and explore the different way to do that, and mainly to find a way sustainable and a cheap way to do.
Maybe just to add to that again, and this is my personal opinion, but I think it challenges health systems to think about ways of bringing people in that aren't traditional and that don't necessarily stick to clinical environments. So Costa Rica used their national football team to create this big campaign. This was just before one of the World Cups. So everybody was watching the football, everyone was interested. And you've actually got a good audience there because you've got a lot of men who typically would be smokers, but everyone appreciates that if you're watching football or if you're thinking about playing football, you need good lung health. So they used that really well. They had kind of big television campaigns, big announcements on local buses, on walls, to try and get a new audience engaged who would never normally turn up at a cessation clinic. So I think there are quite a lot of opportunities to be creative about how you find new audiences as well as how you then deliver the cessation support.
I would like to ask the last one. Have you think about a cigarette pack? Also maybe a very good way to actually help us recruit smokers. Like many countries put the quit line number on the cigarette pack. Maybe we can think about put a website or description about this like cessation program on the cigarette pack as well. So just brainstorming that many ways can be done.
Okay, Esteve Fernandez from the Catalan Institute of Oncology. Coming back to vulnerable populations, I find appealing the possibility of use mobile technologies, of course, and it is appealing in the sense that almost everybody, as you have shown, have a mobile phone and so on. But although it is appealing, what do the data say? In the sense of, do you have data on adherence to the program or even cessation rates according to, for example, socioeconomical status or educational level? Because, well, everybody has a mobile phone, everybody knows how to read a text message and even how to send. Well, now some people doesn't know because they use WhatsApp and other messenger forms, but the literacy of the users may condition the adherence to the program and finally the success of the intervention. So if you have some data about this or some impressions about from the experiences you have run, I would be glad to hear. Thank you.
Let me start first. I think this is one of the things I think that's why we need more evidence. If you look at the Cochrane review, combined 12 studies, only one study in UK we call Milestone study, like they recruited more than 2,000 smokers. Totally, I think including control group is around I think it's around 5,000 or 4,000. The other study are relatively very small sample size. So just to answer your question, at this moment, I didn't see any analyze about the subgroup of the participants. But I think that the Indian study or Indian program actually can inform us many things, because they get like around 2 million people registered for this, so it's able to help us. But at this moment, I see no, we only get the major participants of this study: younger smoker, female smoker, and also those who are ready to quit. For those not ready to quit, I remember there was a study done, like for those who claim they're not ready to quit. I think the study has shown not effective at this moment for several reasons. Maybe the intervention or the content need to be adapted, or the program need to adapt it a bit. But the evidence shows, like for those who are not ready to quit, yeah, the evidence is very weak. But I see there's a need for more study. Even the group here, maybe we can work together to strengthen this area.
Yeah, and I think you're completely right, Dongbo, and also Steve, that it's not a magic bullet. It's not by putting it on a mobile phone you've suddenly got everybody who is a smoker interested in something. If they don't want to quit, they're not necessarily going to care more or less whether it's available on a phone, on their on a computer, on their TV. If their cat tells them, like, there's no further motivation. That's a separate issue. But I think India, one of the reasons it's going to be interesting to see the results is because they have that slide I showed of the live dashboard. So you have that breakdown of knowing roughly, for example, what the gender disparity is. So is it more men or women who respond to this treatment, or is it younger people, or is it in fact older people? Is it contrary to our expectations? And in other areas, I think, of using technology, sometimes it's not what we expect. It's not that younger generations do and older generations don't. So it'll be interesting to see what they do report. So give us like 4 to 5 months and we'll have some answers.
Any more questions or comments? No? So thank you very much to Dongbo and to Susannah, and also to the audience for the questions. Thank you.